Welcome back, Irish fans, to Breaking Down Braves Boys podcast. Today, after the Bellarmine win over a week ago, we got a break, but now we're back previewing UVA. I'm probably going to have Jake on later in the show, but for now, just me and Bennett Conlin. He's a writer and sports reporter for the Daily Progress, covers UVA, knows better than either of us, so I brought him in. Going to ask him a few questions about UVA, give us some good insight. So to start out, I guess I'll just ask you, can you give us a quick breakdown of each starter and kind of what they bring to the table?
Yeah, sure. So they've gone with a few different starting lineups this year, but you've got at least three guys that you can pretty much pencil in as starters. So Kihei Clark at the point guard spot. I think they list him as 5'9". He's sort of the facilitator of the offense, small guy, shoots it decently from three, surprisingly good at getting to the rim for his size. Obviously, 5'9" is not necessarily what you expect from a college kid. So, but he does pretty well. Sam Hauser's the Marquette transfer on the wing, typically starts, really good shooter, gets the ball in the post sometimes, probably best when he's catching and shooting, doesn't facilitate his own shot quite as much as someone like Clark. And then Jay Huff's the 7-foot center. He's an NBA prospect, can shoot the three, can score inside, really good rim protector, probably one of the best players on the team. So Huff's a good one. And then after that, Thomas Wool, the 10 size, another guard, lefty shooter. They stick in there a little bit. His defense has gotten a lot better. And then Reese Beekman, I think they started last game as well. Freshman guard, can also sort of fill in for Clark at the point guard spot. So if they go small, which I think probably makes sense against Notre Dame, that's sort of what you're looking at with Clark, Beekman, Wool, the Tensai, Hauser, and Huff.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I remember Huff last year. I think he came off the bench against us and just killed us. So it's going to be interesting to see him in a starting role, especially when our down low guys are not the strength. But Virginia had a really awful performance, to be honest, against Gonzaga. They lost by like 30 plus, gave up 98, which was like the second highest amount of points they've ever given up in like program history or something. How much do you put into that loss against Gonzaga? Do you think that's the team they are, or do you think that was just an uncharacteristically bad performance?
I think they'll get better as the season goes on, but they played 6 games and they haven't been very impressive. They lost to Gonzaga by 23, and they had a late run in that game. It probably should have been a 30-point loss. Gonzaga, I think, scored on its first shot and then led the entire game. It was really just a beat down, which you don't really expect for Virginia, especially defensively. And Gonzaga is unbelievable offensively, but for Virginia and Tony Bennett, especially the tempo they play to give up 98 points is kind of insane. So they struggled a lot there. They took Kent State, they beat earlier this year, but Kent State took them to overtime. And they also lost to San Francisco. So they're 0-2 against the West Coast Conference teams this year, which I think they're happy they don't have them left on the schedule, I guess. But yeah, I mean, they haven't been that impressive this year. So they've got a long way to go. They're known for their defense typically. And this year, the defense just hasn't been very good. They're much better offensively than a year ago. A year ago, I think they had that Notre Dame game in Charlottesville that went to overtime. I think they outscored Notre Dame like 2-1 in overtime or something gross like that. So I wouldn't expect that this year. I think they're a little bit better scoring the ball, but defensively they've taken a step back for sure.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame game means a lot more to me and Jake than it would to you. I think I get replays and flashbacks from that game all the time. Still mad about that one. But you talked about how they haven't really been impressive lately. Do you think their ranking of 23 is fair for now, or kind of too high or too low?
I think if you take any like their resume and you put a different name on their jersey, I don't think they would be ranked. I think they've sort of gained some respect with the national championship recently and Tony Bennett, what he's done in the program, and that's all deserved. But the resume right now, I mean, you've got an overtime win over Kent State. You've got the loss to San Francisco, blowout loss to Gonzaga, and some, cupcake kind of wins. I think if Notre Dame has that same resume, I don't think Notre Dame's ranked. So I think there's a little bit of just benefit of the doubt. They started the year at number 4 in the preseason AP poll. That certainly helps in terms of clinging around. I think it's hard for voters to kind of get them out of the top 25 once they see them in there. But yeah, I mean, they haven't played like a ranked team. So if I had a vote, which I do not, I would probably not have them in this week's top 25 just because they haven't done anything this year, in my opinion, to sort of earn a ranking.
Mm-hmm. Good to hear, but also on the other hand, Notre Dame has not beat a ranked team since Valley Invitational in like 2017. So their ranking automatically gives them a better chance against Notre Dame. It seems like no matter who they are, if you give Detroit mercy, but if you rank them 25th, we'd have a hard time against them, even though we'd kill them. But is there anything you brought up a lot of their defensive stuff? I know they run the pack line. Can you go over kind of what they do schematically, maybe about their offense and the pack line?
Yeah, so the pack line, the focus is basically to pressure people into the middle. So you have whoever has the ball in the perimeter, the defender is going to pressure the ball. And then you've got four guys that kind of sag a little bit off the 3-point line, kind of across the wing or whatever. And they're sort of trying to help. Anytime a guy will drive the lane, they'll help. So you'll have, if you're driving into the lane, you should, the way it's supposed to be run. They haven't really executed it that well this year. But when you drive in, they'll help off to make sure that there's, pretty much two guys there. If you go into the post, they typically double the post. They do that a lot to kind of get it back out. I mean, the main focus is you want contested threes. I wouldn't say it forces a ton of turnovers. I think some other defenses do a nice job where they're maybe pressuring passing lanes more at the perimeter, and Virginia doesn't do that because they kind of sag off to create the pack line, which is inside the 3-point line. So they're not going to create a ton of turnovers, but they do a good job of really pressuring the ball and helping. And that's where they haven't done a great job this year. They didn't do a great job against Gonzaga. The other part is Gonzaga got out in transition, so the pack line wasn't able to get set up like 25% of the time. But they did a decent job against some other teams earlier this year when it was executing well, and it was last year quite a bit. The help defense is really good. It allows them to force some contested threes. So if you're a poor shooting team or you struggle shooting and you get contested threes, it works out pretty well for Virginia, which is typically why they beat up on so many mid-majors, is the defense is just so good. It's really hard to score against them. Offensively, they typically run the blocker mover, which is kind of a bunch of screens in the post at the same time, which sort of creates some openings. They run sort of a similar wheel action sometimes multiple times just throughout the shot clock, and it sort of makes the tempo go a little bit slower as they probe for that open look, which sometimes can take quite a while. So that's typically what they do. They've done that sometimes this year. They've also done some like ball screen continuity stuff. They've done a 5-out, which they did in the first game where they hit 15 threes against Towson, where they kind of had all 5 guys on the perimeter. And they would sort of probe some guys in there, do some different things. They were able to create some isolation looks for Sam Hauser. It kind of varies by game this year. They're still experimenting with rotations, with scheme, with all those things. Defensively, I think Tony Bennett would have to sort of, be kidnapped and they'd replace him with an imposter for them to do anything other than the pack line defense. So defensively, you're going to get the pack line, but offensively, they kind of vary by game this year, and they've been decent offensively, and it's worked pretty well. It's kind of shocking to the pack line that hasn't maybe worked to what they've expected so far.
Mm-hmm. Can't blame them for sticking with it at all based on the success they've had with it in the past. You kind of made it sound like you kind of have to shoot the lights out against them to win. Would you say that's accurate?
I think that's probably what makes the most sense. You look at San Francisco, I think they hit double-digit threes despite only scoring like 61 in that victory. So a lot of their points came from the 3-point line when they were able to beat Virginia. Gonzaga, Corey Kispert, I think he hit 8 threes on his own. So, I mean, if you can knock down the threes, it certainly helps. And yeah, I think it's a decent matchup for Notre Dame from that regard. You've got, a bunch of starters that can all shoot the three pretty well. So I think that helps a little bit. For sure. And that's kind of the way to beat Virginia for the most part, is knocking down threes. And obviously that helps against pretty much any team if you can score from the 3-point line, but they're tough to score against in the post because of how they double so much. So if you can knock down some threes, it helps. And this year, I think specifically, if you can get out and transition a little bit, it's really helpful. Typically they're unbelievable in transition defense. And this year they've kind of struggled. They struggled a lot against Gonzaga, which pretty much everyone in the country has this year, but they struggled a lot there, and they've had some iffy defensive performances. So they try to force those contested threes with the pack line, and they've kind of struggled to actually contest some of those at times this year, even against the mid-majors. So, yeah, if you can shoot the three well, get some open looks there, it's a pretty good formula to try to take down Virginia.
Gotcha. So what do you think their biggest strength is and weakness, I guess, as a team in general? There's a lot to it.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think for strength, I would say depth. They've got a ton of guys that can play. You look at just the guard spot. You've got Kihei Clark, Reese Beekman, Thomas Wolatensai, Casey Morsell. Morsell still needs to shoot the ball a little bit better, but he's a talented sophomore guard. So some depth there. Trey Murphy sometimes comes off the bench. Occasionally they'll sort of stick him into a starting role. He's a 6'9" Rice transfer with a ton of length. He's shooting like 56% from three, probably the most athletic guy on the team. So he's a good one, and he was able to get a waiver. I guess at this point it wouldn't have mattered with all the NCAA rules with the transfer process is kind of nonsense, which I think Notre Dame fans probably have seen this year a little bit. But yeah, so when Murphy's in there, he's a really good player, and he complements Hauser well. Hauser's obviously the Marquette transfer who shoots the ball really well, can score. You've got Jay Huff, Caden Shedrick's a redshirt freshman. He's 6'11". He's just super long. So when they put him in, he's a good shot blocker and can score. He had sort of a mono-like illness in the fall, so he missed some time and is trying to get up to speed, but he's done a nice job sort of in limited minutes. So they've got a ton of guys that can come in and play. So there is some depth there, I think is certainly the strength. But in terms of weaknesses, so far it's just been the defensive performance. And some of it too is, I mean, you could even look at the depth as a weakness through the first 6 games, just because, you know, they've tried so many different lineups. They don't really know which lineup works best at this point. They've, you know, tried out 5 different like offensive philosophies through 6 games. They're kind of just trying to figure out what works best. They treated the first couple games sort of like, you know, preseason scrimmages kind of. I mean, they obviously wanted to win, but you look at the San Francisco game, they're really playing with some weird lineups and trying stuff out. So the weakness maybe is that they don't know who their best 5 is at any time. They end the game with different 5s. They aren't entirely sure what they want to do there. So the inconsistency on defense, which probably comes a little bit from not knowing your 8-man rotation or whatever they want to end up getting to, is certainly a little bit of a concern. But yeah, it's surprising to talk about a Virginia team and see them struggling on defense. But I think if there's a time to play them this year with their defense not going great, it's certainly the ACC opener. It's a good timing for Notre Dame, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I was about to say that. It's really weird to hear defense is a weakness, because going into last year's game, I remember it was all Notre Dame's going to have a tough time doing this and this and this on offense. But especially because they don't pressure the guards like a lot of teams Notre Dame's played, I think it could be really interesting to see how Notre Dame comes out. But we've talked about how Virginia has struggled to kind of put it together so far, but it kind of seems like they're still a better team than Notre Dame is at this point in the season. What do you think they have to do to beat Notre Dame?
Yeah, I think defending the 3-point line is going to be huge. Obviously, the pack line, if the goal is to try to force teams in the lane at times, force them into the middle and help really well. And they've talked about how they haven't helped really well. So if the philosophy is to force, you know, them into a situation where you play help defense and you're not playing help defense well, obviously that doesn't work out too well. And they struggled a lot against Gonzaga with that. So I think defending the 3-point line will be important. The other thing is they've just kind of lacked like intensity. I don't know if it's the lack of crowds or what, but P.A. Clark had actually said that some of the players seemed scared against Gonzaga, which you don't typically see any high major team, you know, let alone a reigning national champion, scared to play anyone. I think that was a little bit surprising. So they seemed overwhelmed by the moment. And then some of the earlier games against San Francisco, that was the day after Thanksgiving in Bubbleville. So it was up in Connecticut at the Mohegan Sun, and they just seemed flat against Kent State. The game went to overtime. They seemed flat until overtime when they sort of took over and won by 7. I think they only allowed like 2 points in the overtime period. It went a while. Both teams, I think, went 3.5, 4 minutes without scoring in the overtime, which kind of gave the shades of that UVA Notre Dame game from last year with the low scoring overtime. But yeah, I mean, they've just lacked an intensity this year that's surprising. You expect a team to maybe be a little more amped to play just because the season was kind of uncertain. When you are able to get out there, you figured they'd be pretty stoked. I thought they'd be really amped and competitive against Gonzaga, and instead some of them were scared and overwhelmed. So that's the other thing, is if they can actually lock in and stay focused. I don't know if Notre Dame is quite as scary as Gonzaga, but I think playing a conference game on the road, even if it isn't, you know, a packed road environment, you've got to bring some sort of energy. So that's a key for Virginia. You got to defend the 3-point line. You got to actually bring a little bit of juice and energy, because they haven't really had it through 6 games.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I'm sure the crowd plays a big part of it, like you said, but I watched a bit of that Kihei Clark presser, or I saw a bunch of quotes on Twitter. Definitely did not like the intensity they played with, and I think he said their defense was like selfish or something. He was not happy, but
He did. He did. Yeah, he said they were selfish. I was talking to you about how they sort of focus on help defense, and I think there were times where guys just didn't help for whatever reason. So they're going to get that fixed, or at least they've got to. Obviously, you don't have a ton of time, especially when you're playing the game in Texas. Then you got a couple days in between, and it's another road game in Indiana. So you've got that travel things. We'll see how many practices they can squeeze in, but I imagine it would be rather intense on the defensive end. You certainly can't be selfish if you're expecting to play the pack line defense at any sort of high level.
For sure. So that's all I got for you, except before I let you go, I want to get a prediction. I don't know how big of a prediction guy you are, but just give me a range or what team you're going to win or what team's going to win.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think it'll be close. I think both teams are solid. I kind of think the matchup is solid for Notre Dame because Virginia's been struggling. They're not defending the three that well. You've got so many good guards and talented guards for Notre Dame that I think that works well. I'm leaning Virginia still just because Notre Dame has had a sizable amount of chances this year against some of these solid teams. And you obviously got the Kentucky game that they gritted out at the end and were able to sort of hold on after playing pretty well early. But Kentucky's certainly not looking like a normal Kentucky team this year. I think that those games are definitely going to benefit Notre Dame. They've been battle tested. Virginia has one battle and they got blown out of the water by Gonzaga. I wouldn't really consider San Francisco or Kent State your typical battle test. So I think that'll help Notre Dame. I'm going to lean Virginia in a tight game, but I would not be surprised at all if Notre Dame did win. I think Virginia's going to try to do a little bit of a better job, and I think they will, defending the three and maybe getting back in transition. Notre Dame also does a nice job sort of setting up its half court, so it should be a fun one. If it goes to overtime, I hope someone's able to score in the overtime period. God forbid we get sort of a repeat of last year's performance, but I think Notre Dame's got a pretty good shot. I would still lean Virginia just because I think they've probably got more depth and maybe a little bit more talent, but a good spot for Notre Dame for sure to play Virginia. I think if there's a time to get them coming off of a scared, overwhelming loss, I think is a decent time.
Gotcha. Definitely understandable that you pick Virginia based on everything, but just wanted to let you know that Notre Dame unequivocally would have won in the ACC tournament if it happened. Not hearing
I
any other arguments, but
wish we could have gotten to that game. I think that could have been a really fun one.
yeah, for sure. I would have been there if everything would have been normal. So I definitely wish that would have happened. But that's all I got for you today. Hopefully, I'm not sure if Notre Dame plays them again, but if they do, we'll try to have you back on. But thanks for coming on. Any closing thoughts?
I think that's mostly it. I'm excited to see this one though. I think it's fun that ACC basketball has finally arrived. I think one of the games, I think Duke might have been postponed for whatever the game is on the 29th. So fingers crossed per usual anytime you're leading up to a game that they actually take the court. But as long as they do, I think it'll be a good one and maybe a little more traditional for Virginia in terms of scoring. I think this game in the 60s would make sense and be a lot of fun. So fingers crossed we get a good one.
All right, so now that we talked about UVA with an expert, we got some insight about them. I brought on Jake, and we wanted to recap the first half of the season. Not ideal, but there are some positives to it. So I guess I'll go to Jake first. Jake, just give me a brief, not a brief, like a broad overview of your opinion about the first half of the season.
Just not good enough, I would say. I wouldn't say hopeless, but there's flashes. I'd say if I could describe it, it's flashes, but it's not anything continued, really. I mean, you see flashes from Hub, you see flashes. Well, Nate has been consistently our best player, for sure. Saw flashes from Wirtz. I mean, you had that one game, Wirtz goes off, and Hub gets 0. Then the next game, goes off, Wirtz gets 0. It's kind of like, you only see flashes, really. And then I'd say the other players are just not good enough. I think Durham's had, on the defensive end, he's been fine enough, even with the fouls. But on the offensive end, it's year 5, and he doesn't really add anything there. It's like, Now, Cormac Ryan, I know it's a tough adjustment. I see flashes, but has not been good enough. And the bench has given pretty much nothing. Like, Dogo has been okay, but, I don't know if he's been sixth man okay. Sanders, I mean, I don't know if he's really ready, and he's a freshman, so that's fine. Same thing with Zona. He's shown a little bit more. His team has talent, but really, it's just flashes at the moment. So, I mean, I hope with more momentum that can, kick into a higher gear, really, and we can have a successful season, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Has your outlook changed at all on if this is a tournament team or not?
I'd be more willing to say they're a tournament team now with Wirtz than I would at the beginning of the season. But yes, it has.
I would say I almost think it's gotten worse, my outlook, just because of not necessarily because of Notre Dame. Well, to an extent because of Notre Dame because they're 3-4. But if you look at the rest of the ACC and how they've struggled in non-conference play, we were talking about Virginia earlier, lost to San Francisco, got blown out by Gonzaga. That was supposed to be like the best team in the ACC. Duke got, I think, blown out by Michigan State. But it's going to be really tough to get in the tournament. The ACC could be a 5, 6, 7. They could have that many teams in, which would not be good for us because I don't know that we're in that category of top 5 or 6 in the ACC. So it's going to be really tough unless they get on a roll here. And I wanted to ask you, what do you outside of winning games, because I think we all want that, what are you hoping to see in the second half of the year?
Oh, that's I would say a better defense. I know we have to be realistic with our expectations as to what extent it can improve, but we're not saying we need to be Virginia. We need to be like a Tony Bennett squad. But I would like if they got better on that end. I would like to see the guards have more consistency as well, and I would like to see us feed Nate more because I think in the last few games after a hot start we haven't really done that. Those would be my main wants this season.
For sure. I would say more from like a player development sort of standpoint. I want to see more. Like we know from those old Notre Dame teams that the front line quality has been there, like with Jaren Grant, Demetrius Jackson, Bonzi. But like we've seen the stars that the old teams have. I don't know that this team has one of those yet. So I'd really love to see somebody step up, even if we don't make the tournament, and kind of take control of the team on the offensive end especially. But the consistency from the guards has also been something I've been concerned about. Matt Painter put it best. I don't know if you saw his presser before the Notre Dame game, but he was talking about how hard it is to get all your guards going like that. So I think you need 2 or 3 to show up every game, but not maybe all 4. Like if you can get Hub and Cormac going, or Hub and Wirtz, Hub and Goodwin, that's good enough to win games. But the other ones just they have to have some sort of impact. You can't have no impact like Hub did against Purdue or Wirtz had against Bellarmine. I guess you can against Bellarmine, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. Rebounding has been an issue at times. Defense, I mean, just stuff that we thought could be an issue has all been an issue. So that's what I have. And then I guess we can just go over our thoughts on every player briefly. I guess
Can I ask a question that kind of had relation to something you said about earlier teams? How many players on this team do you think would have started on those 2015, 16, 17 teams?
It's an interesting question. So,
do you think Nate? I think Nate definitely starts on at least some of them. I'm not sure if he started 2015. If they could go bigger with him. I don't really know.
I don't think Hub or Ryan, probably not even Goodwin, unless Goodwin over Vistoria.
I wouldn't say that yet.
Yeah, because I don't think you can get Hub or Ryan to start over Grant or Jackson, or I think Hub could probably start over Farrell. I think, but I don't know.
I don't know. I think a player like Farrell would help us a lot because he's is more of a true point guard, whereas Hub is like, kind of that. Wirtz is kind of that. Ryan is kind of a point guard. But Farrell's definitely he's a ball handler and can distribute. I think Farrell could help this team almost as much as any past player that wasn't a star. I think Farrell, helps that team. I think Nate definitely starts on 2016 and 2017.
Yeah.
2015 is an interesting case. I'm not really sure about that. You'd probably have to put him in for Astoria and go big, but the fact that we're saying only maybe one guy would, just really does say a lot.
For sure. I wanted to ask you also, I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks. Do you think they would be better off with Wirtz at the 1 and Hub moving to the wing? Obviously, it would take time for Hub to kind of adjust to being a catch-and-shoot guy on the wing. But I think it could be really beneficial if it works. I just don't know if you do it mid-season. What do you think?
Well, wasn't Wirtz doing that in one of the games?
Yeah, Wirtz was bringing the ball up a ton in the Purdue game, and the turnovers were
No, it's interesting.
a lot less. The offense was rolling better. So,
that's interesting. I haven't really seen him, but I mean, if Bray sees him in practice every day, Bray sees him, watches film, knows how he and Hub run, and he makes that decision, then I mean, I'm gonna have to trust him there. It is interesting for sure. But we kind of really have 3 combo guards.
Yeah.
Starting, and I mean, I would like to see Wirtz actually be like a real point guard for sure. Honestly.
Yeah, for sure. So I remember we had talked about Cormac Ryan in DMs a little bit. You want to give your thoughts on him so far? I think I'm a little more optimistic than most people, but you should go first with him.
I haven't really seen the hype so far. I've seen flashes. I think there's talent. I think writing him off would be foolish, but he has to get better, and I think Cormac would be, the first person to say that. He needs to get better, really. Now he's caught fire at times, but really, as I said before, consistency needs to be, something happening more with him and others.
For sure. I think I like what I've seen from him at times. Like you said, the Ohio State game, he had 15 and a half. But after that, we haven't really seen anything from him. I was trying to pull up his Bellarmine stats, but it's not loading. But I remember Purdue, he had 14, mostly in garbage time. He's shooting 30 – how is he shooting 32% from the field? He's shooting 34% from 3. Not super efficient, more efficient than he was at Stanford, but his defense hasn't been great either. But I think people need to remember this is his second year of college basketball, so that could definitely play a factor, especially going into the ACC play. I think he's going to need some time to adjust, but he's really been a big energy guy, taking a lot of charges, being a leader, but we haven't really seen much more than that from him. We've seen him take some tough shots and hit them, but haven't seen much else.
Yeah, he went 2 for 7 with 7 points against Bellarmine. 5 rebounds, 1 assist. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's like, he's averaging 10-4, 4 if you round up, 10-4 on the season, and he shoots well at the line, so his true shooting percentage is a 4.86, which is pretty bad, but not like that's not like horrific or anything. I would like to see him be more of a. It's kind of a weird fit with Wirtz because he does it too, but I like to see him be more of a 3-point shooter, and Hub can drive inside more because that seems to be a strength. But really,
yeah. I thought Cormac was going to be way more of a shot creator than he has been so far. I mean, most of the shots he creates off the dribble for himself are like deep threes with a guy in his face. I thought that would be way more of a strength from the film I've seen at Stanford and high school, but that hasn't really amounted. So hopefully he can get that going. Uh, one more question before we, I guess, go into Virginia prep. If you have anything else, what would your starting lineup be? I mean, obviously it changes against a team like Virginia or Purdue, who's a little bit bigger. But what's your starting lineup if we play like a team that's like average? Like no, not way better in the front court, not way better in the back court.
I would probably say, it's hard to say. We're starting Hub, Wirtz, Dane, and Nate, obviously.
Mhm.
It's just a question of who else starts. Me, you have four options to start in that last spot. You have Cormac, you have Durham, you have even Jogo, who really has not been too bad this season. He's shooting 58%, 50% from free. He's averaging 4-2-1 in 17 minutes. So I mean, it's not horrible.
And he's playing
And
through.
then I think Zona, who I don't really think is ready. Do you think it's unfair to make the argument that Shogo's been the best of those four players this season? So it could be him.
I would probably say Cormac's been better, just because Cormac's shown you flashes on the offensive side. Jogo hasn't really. Jogo's kind of just had some catch and shoot threes, just done what he's supposed to in his role, I guess. I would say my starting lineup, I'd probably say Hub, Wirtz, Ryan, Goodwin, Liszetsky, and then put Durham in against big teams. But that's just me. I don't know what you.
Yeah, it has to depend on the team, really. You know, and then hopefully we can get Carmi back because they need more guard minutes off the bench, even with Wirtz. But like, I don't really know where they are with that. I mean, this is 3 seasons in a row where he's basically medical redshirted. It's been that bad, and I feel bad for him. Hopefully, I can, like, just imagine that happens to somebody in high school. That would be bad.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And then, I mean, Hub and Goodwin have played 37 minutes a game each, so you definitely have to get Carmody in. He's going to be back later January, I guess. So maybe they could aim for like the Miami game with him because they have a week off before that game. I think that might be like a reasonable return time for him. So that'd be cool on the 24th. But if you can get the rotation up to 8 guys consistently, you're in really good shape. It's just Sanders and Zona haven't really shown me much. Neither of them look super ready, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they develop over the next few years. I think we've made a bunch of predictions on that, so we'll just let it be for now. But any other thoughts on the team in general before we head into Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, I like what I see from Zona, but you can definitely tell he's not fully ready.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So yeah, that's all I have for the current team, I guess, before we head into the Virginia preview. Anything else?
No, nothing else.
All right, so now that we talked about Notre Dame a lot, we kind of recapped their first couple months of the season as objectively as we could, I guess, being Notre Dame fans. Let's go into Virginia now. So to start, I'm going to go with the keys to the game. One, we talked about it earlier, shoot the lights out. Virginia's not really going to pressure you, and so they're going to let you shoot a lot of threes. So if you can get hot, even if you can get 2 of the 4 guards to get hot from 3, you're in a really good spot against them, especially considering the type of defense they played against Gonzaga. 2, I'm going to say rebound. We've struggled with that. Struggled with that against Purdue, and that cost us the game. Jay Huff could really kill us down low if we don't rebound and let him get second chances. So that's my second key. And then third, I'm going to say force turnovers and get in transition. Kihei Clark isn't really a turnover-prone guard, but if we can force some turnovers and get in transition, we saw them get a lot of easy baskets against Virginia last year in transition enough to slow it down for the pack line. So I think that's going to be a huge key is if we can get out in transition, get out and run, not let them set up in the pack line. They haven't really been good in transition this year on defense, so that's definitely something we can exploit. My matchup to watch is Nate Liszetsky versus Joey Hauser. I mean, probably the best matchup of skill sets we have. I think these are two of the most talented players in the entire game. So whoever wins this matchup could really have a leg up if your best player is kind of taking a step forward in this one. So I'm going to go with Liszetsky versus Hauser. That could be a huge key. And then my leading scorer, I'm going to go with Prentice Hub. I think they're going to give him a lot of space to get open looks up top. So going to go with him for my leading scorer. Jake, I guess I'll go to you for this one too. You have any prediction for the leading scorer?
I'm going to go with Hub. And for my key matchup, I'm going to go with Hub versus Clark. I think, we really need somebody like Hub to just take over games like he has sometimes, but not all the time against, with Virginia defense like this one. So I would definitely say that. I think that would really be the key for us.
For sure. Clark definitely isn't there defensively either, so Hub could really take advantage of that matchup. Not going to let him get to the basket as much, but if Hub can hit some tough shots, Clark's going to give him some room. So that's going to be something they can really exploit for sure. And then I guess we'll go to Jake, go back to him for the prediction first. What do you think is going to happen for this one?
I think Virginia will win by like 7 or 8.
Really? That is actually interesting. I think we're both less optimistic than Bennett, the Virginia writer. So really interesting. I'm going to say Notre Dame or UVA by 5. I think this is one of the most winnable games Notre Dame's had this year, to be honest, just because I think they match up really well against Virginia, and they haven't matched up well against other teams they played this year, like MSU or Duke or even Ohio State. So I think they match up really well against them, but I just can't pick them to beat a ranked team. I'm sure you're in the same boat. Until they actually do it, I don't think they can beat them. Or I'm not predicting that at least, even though I think they can do it. So that's all I got for this one. Jake, any closing thoughts?
No, hope for a good outcome. So go Irish.
Go Irish. And maybe we'll be back with the Pitt preview. Who even knows that game's happening? By the time this is posted, maybe we'll know. But their game just got canceled, so we'll see what happens. But thank you guys for watching. Go Irish. Peace.